So,
Toto, where do you live, sir? Do you live in Hollywood, sir?
Christian,
Maybe
he
can't
asked,
hear
where do
me.
you live?
Sorry. No, I'm actually in Denver, Colorado.
I see. What's
Just
the
next to
Hollywood
Hollywood.
in Toto? What's the Hollywood in Toto about, sir?
So that's my website. It's an entertainment news site, but it covers Hollywood from a right-of-center perspective. And I'm also a film critic.
God bless you. For whom are you a film critic, sir?
HollywoodinToto.com. His own.
My site, the Daily Wire, and some other sources as well.
And on that note, I want to welcome everyone to the world, according to that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. Hello, sir.
Hello, gentlemen, and everyone in the world. Hello to all the ships at sea, as Walter Winchell used to say.
And and of course, I want to thank everybody that's in the YouTube chat and that follows us on Parler at Ben Stein. We are humbled. We are humbled by all the downloaded podcasts. It is on Apple and all across all the streaming networks. We truly thank you. And we are joined for the first time tonight by HollywoodinToto.com, Christian Toto. Thank you so much for making it easy with all your info in front of you, Christian. It makes life for me a lot easier. Welcome.
My pleasure.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
How are you tonight, sir?
Good. Raring to talk and looking forward to it.
And of course, from the simplelife.com. Now.com. You see, I can never get it right. Gary Collins, if you put it across the screen.
If I put it down there, you would see it, right?
And I've spoken
down there
so many times. And I love your site and I love your podcast. And of course, welcome Gary back as always. But this show wouldn't be complete without lawyer, actor, provocateur, lover, saint, sinner, father, husband, grandfather, doctor, lawyer.
Many people do not know that I'm a doctor. My office hours are by appointment only, but I specialize in geriatric compulsions. Geriatric
compulsions. And I want to welcome everybody on this fine Saturday night. And Christian, but you told me you started writing and working for Real Clear Politics. So that's very cool and interesting. And one of the things we are going to talk about tonight is big tech, but there's something Ben and me often talk about this of how the hell Ben and I, thank you, of how the hell did we get here? And as a society, I mean, right, instead of a mad as hell and I can't take it, a mad as hell, it's like, how the hell, Ben, did we end up here? I know Gary's at that point where he wants to, take the RV and move somewhere. But Ben, how the hell did we get here?
We got here because we had a lot of crazy, pathetic people as our leaders. And I think societies generally fall apart when their leaders fall apart. And we had just several generations of very poor leaders. And when we finally got one good leader, he so infuriated the mass media and the critics, no harm intended to critics, that they had to get rid of him. And so they did. And so the mass media went on the warpath, basically had a revolution. They used racism as their main ideological tool, which is a complete phony, but they used it anyway. And so now we have a society in which people live in terror of being called racist, live in terror of not following whatever beacon the mainstream media has laid out for them, and just generally, I would say, live in terror.
So you bring up a great point, and I want to get this to everybody because everybody, this isn't a new thing. Okay, this isn't Donald Trump losing. This is 70 years in the making of a societal, Donald Trump was the fly in the ointment that the globalists and the media here made sure they got rid of Ben. But this has been a long time coming with the universities to just indoctrination. And here we are today where people are literally, where you're scared when you hear sirens, you're scared you're going to get pulled over by the thought police.
Well, I have to say, I'm just naturally a fearful person, but I'm scared, even when I talk on my car phone, that somebody's going to be listening to my car phone and is going to pull me over for saying that the election was stolen or that the election should not have turned out the way it did. I think we are living in a climate of fear about a new American police state that has been unrivaled in my lifetime. Although the people, some will say the McCarthy era was close, and in some ways it was. But this has the internet work going for it, and that is a very scary tool of surveillance.
Christian Toto, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think you've got two different cultures. On the right, people want to live and let live. They want to live their lives. They want to be with their families, go to work, kiss the kids goodnight. And they don't see every single cultural opportunity as a way to weaponize their belief system. And I think on the left, it's the opposite. I think people in Hollywood say, I'm popular, I'm attractive, I can make movies. Well, that's not enough. I want to send a message with my movies. I think people in academia say it's not enough that I'm in front of this classroom talking to people. I want to use that to indoctrinate you. So I think there are two different mindsets here. And I think that while the left is like, we got to boycott, I think people on the right are often like, no, we don't do it that way. Well, you know what? When you're playing by a different set of rules, there are different outcomes. And I think we're seeing the results of that right now.
That's actually
Very
an
well put,
exception.
very artistically
Well
put.
put, exceptional point. And Gary, the question, I know you're just sitting there livid. And for everybody that's listening or doesn't know Gary has served our country for over 20 years, or did serve our country for 20 years. Now he serves in a different way, and he's a true patriot. And he's served in all different forms of government. And Gary, I mean, you've seen this coming. Ben's been writing about this for 50 years, and it's absolutely frightening.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm from California, though I'm from a little podunk town where we are all poor. There's a couple middle-class people, and that was about it. But I think the problem today is enough kids haven't been spanked and told to go to their bedroom without dinner is the problem. Honestly, we've got a bunch of spoiled brats, a bunch of people who've never suffered, who have never served their country, who've never done anything. And I find it amazing that all left-leaning billionaires are ethnic, what would you call them? Ethnic liberators. Everyone else is a racist somehow. Even it's amazing how I'm honestly getting sick and tired of being called a racist. I've done nothing.
We all
I've
are.
done nothing against anyone.
We all are. How do you, look, I'm Gary, how old are you, my friend?
I'm 50.
Okay, so I'm 26 years older than you. When I was in high school, marched for equal accommodations at the local movie theater in Maryland, where I grew up. And so that's a hell of a long time ago, 1961 or 2. And I am being called a racist for saying that people should be promoted on the basis of merit and not on the basis of race. And this by people who don't even know what racism is. They have no idea.
That's exactly right.
Is.
That's exactly right, Ben. You just summed it up. It's a word people say that they have no idea what it means.
Yeah, it's writing it. It's when I was, again, I'm much older than anybody else in this panel. I can remember when it was really frightening to be called a communist, but people were not generally called communists unless they had some connection, however tenuous, with communism. But now people can be called racist for any reason whatsoever, and once you're called that, how do you escape from that box? That you're locked in that box for a very long time, maybe forever. I mean, how do you escape it? I frankly don't know. I mean, I thank God that I'm so insignificant that nobody bothers to really go head on calling me a racist, but some people do, and it's very upsetting. I think to myself, I have on my buttock a scar from being pushed against a curb and falling down on Route 50 in Cambridge, Maryland, my home state, Maryland, for demonstrating for equal accommodations for African Americans. And I think to myself, I don't think these kids at Yale have those scars. And why? What makes them my judge? Where did they get the right to judge me?
So Christian, as I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story, but again, I shared this with Gary and Ben, but in Major League Baseball right now, they're trying to, the All-Star game is supposed to be in Georgia this year, and they are trying to take away the All-Star game from Georgia because of the racist decision to make sure people could vote legally. I didn't know that that was.
You're being way too kind to the leftists here. That's not like you. The criticism is for bills in the Georgia state legislature that would require people, even in the most modest way, to authenticate their identity before they vote, even in the most tiny way. And that makes you a racist, even if you in the most tiny way want to authenticate that this person is really a person, really of legal voting age, really not a felon, and really is a citizen of Georgia. That makes you a racist.
Pretty much these days, anything makes you a racist. Go ahead.
A quick point on the racist term. They use the term racist because they want to shut you up, because they can't argue in the merits of the conversation. So if you say, well, voter ID, I show voter ID when I go on the plane, it's not a racist situation. There's no real back and forth. There's no argument. There's no debate. It's you're a racist, shut up. And often in our culture, what's worse than being called a racist? Not much. So you tend to shut up, or you tend to be silenced, or you tend to be ignored. And it's a very effective cudgel that's used, and that's why it's in play.
And the horror of it is, as you so rightly say, Christian, it's against freedom of speech. And the whole idea of freedom of speech is that even racists can say whatever's on their mind. I mean, I grew up in an era when you had people like Strom Thurmond and other extreme racists in the Senate and in Congress. And I didn't like them. I didn't think they were great people. I wouldn't have wanted them as my next door neighbor. They definitely wouldn't want me as their next door neighbor. But that's freedom of speech. The people we are dealing with now are against freedom of speech, and freedom of speech is the bedrock of the Constitution and the bedrock of America. To take that away is a really terrible matter and basically ends America as we know it.
So Gary, let me ask you a question. So you grew up, as you've shared before, you grew up dirt poor, you worked your way up from the bottom. And essentially what they're saying is when they call people, with the voter ID laws and all this stuff, they're basically insulting the Black community by saying you're so dumb and stupid that you can't fill out a form. That you're dumb, you're this. And Gary, growing up poor or growing up disadvantaged doesn't mean you can't fill out a form, as you so aptly did and served our country.
Well, yeah, I had to have a driver's license when I turned 16, and I had to have that as proof of ID to serve my country. Interesting. But according to them, they don't need to have an ID to vote, yet I have to protect that right to vote by having an ID. And not only that, here's the problem. When you see this looting and these underprivileged in these bad neighborhoods, they can afford or get a hold of $200 a pair Air Jordans, but they can't afford to go get an ID. I'm tired of it.
But sir, you have really nailed it. I mean, we've got in 13 minutes into our program, we've gotten into it. What we're really doing here is saying Black people do not have to live up to the same standards as white people. If a Black person loots, he's justified. He's been oppressed. He's been racially biased. There has been racial bias applied against him. If a white person does anything whatsoever, it's his own hook. It's his own lookout. He can't blame anyone for it. We have a situation now where after many decades of struggle to get equality for races, we now have a situation where we are explicitly trying to get one race to be superior to the other race just on the basis of their race. That is not what the Constitution is all about, and that is not what a free society is all about. And nobody wants Black people to have equal rights more than I do, but I do not want any ethnic group to have superior rights over any other ethnic group by virtue of their ethnicity.
Well, the new head of, I want to say he's psychological evaluations or personnel for Special Operations Command. He's a Black, I want to say, colonel. The guy, I never heard of the guy before. And they interviewed him, and he was talking about how that we need to start looking for the people within the military who are extremists, and we need to start routing them out. I went, is anyone listening
It's
to this?
worse than that.
Can you imagine a white leader of a military division going, you know what? We've got to get rid of these black people because they're just too radical. Could you imagine someone saying that? And I was listening to the words of this guy, and I was absolutely appalled. I would tell anyone right now who is a part or thinking about going in the military, don't do it. If these are the ass clowns who are going to be in leadership positions, they're going to be hunting you if you don't agree with them. I've been there. I spent a lifetime in this, I'm telling you, I've watched people get hunted. It's ugly when the government starts hunting their own and the rules are out the door. I'll be honest with you. I left the second year of the Obama administration. I'll just say that. I won't say anything else. I saw the writing on the wall. I left and I said, enough's enough, because they started hunting our own. Remember his famous words of, we're going to protect the whistleblowers? You know what they did? They hunted the whistleblowers. That's exactly
and it works evil on the other side too, which is that they promote people on the basis of race and ethnicity. There's been a tremendous amount written about how within the Department of Defense, promotion and advancement and leadership are now going to be handed out on the basis of race. They're sick of there being so many white people in charge of military units and military entities of any kind. And so they're going to divide them up on the basis of race. This is a terrible idea. It's incredibly important that the military be led by people on the basis of their merit. I certainly would not even consider wanting to have people of any ethnicity discriminated against because of their race or ethnicity, but to advance them regardless of merit because of their race or ethnicity, that is an invitation to catastrophe.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Welcome everybody that's a little late to the party in the chat. And I want to remind everybody, download the podcast. Also, sign up for Ben's newsletter, benstein.substack.com. We don't take money for any of this. We do this for fun and for free because we love to do it. We're joined tonight by Christian Toto from hollywoodandtoto.com. And of course, Gary Collins from simplelifenow.com. And we're talking about how did we get here? And I was watching video clips, and Gary had written, Christian had written a piece about the suppression of comics by big tech, and I was watching a George Carlin video, where he was going off on liberals, and it used to be punk to go against the establishment. It used to be like that there was a love for being against the establishment, and now it's suppressed, Ben. They are literally blacking out movies. They are blacking out comics. They are blacking out people with differing thoughts. How did we let big tech get so big? They planned this?
Because big tech figured out the weapon to use against America, namely allegations of racism. They had tried many different things, but the allegations of racism worked because many Americans did feel guilty about America's racist past. And let's not kid ourselves. America did have a very serious racist past. So did every country in the world. But use of that tool enabled them to clobber the Constitution, clobber all kinds of entities in which merit was the main deciding factor in advancement and promotion, and to set up a reign of terror.
What do you say about that, Christian? Because you wrote a piece for Real Clear about comics being suppressed, but pretty much everybody is fair game right now.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One is, a few years ago, it was decided in the culture that comedy matters, that comedy can change hearts and minds, and that the comedy aimed in the wrong direction could be trouble for people on the left. And that's why you're seeing all the comedians staying aggressively to the left and not attacking any of their own. But also, what I find amazing, and just, I love Hollywood in a sense. That's why I became a critic and a reporter. But it just breaks my heart and my soul to watch the almost entire Hollywood community basically line up and say, yeah, go big tech suppression. There were so many celebrities that were cheering on the fact that Donald Trump got banned from every platform imaginable. They loved it.
Because they are not really artists. They are really thugs and money-making machines. I see when I first came to Hollywood, I worked for a wonderful, wonderful man, extreme leftist, but a wonderful man named Norman Lear. I'm happy to say he's still alive at 99. I just got a very loving text, email from him today. But he could accept all different kinds of viewpoints within his comedy workshop. He was making at one time 7 or 8 sitcoms on at prime time, which in those days was unimaginable. But he could accept all kinds of different points of view within his establishment. That couldn't happen now. You have to be right on the line, doing whatever the boss says. It's exactly like pre-Emancipation Proclamation plantations. You have to do exactly what the boss says, or you get horsewhipped.
And I want to bring in
why so many of his sitcoms were so magical. The fact that he was able to kind of accept different views and not be sort of lockstep in his thinking, even though he felt a certain way. His artistic sensibilities maybe had more an openness to it that accepted different potential and different writers. And you know what I see in the landscape today are these woke stories where it's very doctrinaire, very one-sided, very black and white, and that's not good storytelling. And
it's all over the dial, sir. Christian, it's all over the dial. It's not just comedies, it's dramas too. There's always the black person is going to be the hero. Always the businessman is going to be the villain. Always the middle class or upper middle class white person is going to be the killer. Always the guy who's from the gang, the ghetto gang, is going to turn out to be the good guy. They have managed to create an alternative America in which one group, white middle class and upper middle class males, are thugs and fascists. I'm sorry to say, that is how Hollywood has created America. And people watch it and they think, well, that's America. We don't know much outside the line, outside our home, but we guess this is the way life is in America. It isn't that way at all. This is just the alternative lifestyle created and broadcast to America by Hollywood. It's frighteningly untrue.
One of my favorite things, though, is Gary and I are both massive fans of the band Rush, and Gary belongs to some.
How could you tell?
And I have to go turn on the air conditioning.
And Gary belongs to tell the story, because I know how livid it's made here.
Of what? Oh, of the far left taking over
Yeah.
Rush? Oh God. I'm gonna probably get myself in trouble, but I don't care. You know that. But yeah, I saw this movement to where there was a group that had this Rush event every year. I don't want to name because they can't defend themselves, and I don't believe in doing that. But I could tell one of them, let's just say, worked for Obama. And it took on this weird slant, and the things they were saying, them all, this is not what Rush is about at all. And then they had the audacity to put Rush, Black Lives Matter, and people came unglued. And I was one of them. I didn't say anything because I knew that I would scorch the earth, and I knew not to say anything. But I laughed because they always rip on Ayn Rand, right? They go, oh, she was a racist, she was a bigot, she was a sexist, she was this. And I go, have you read any of her books? No, it doesn't matter. And I laughed because if you actually are a true Rush fan, Neil Peart used Ayn Rand well beyond he said that he no longer did, because he caught so much crap for it. If you are a big Rush fan, I've read Ayn Rand's book several times. His lyrics were influenced almost all the way to the end. So shut up.
And I think what Gary said just now is a very important point, Ben. There aren't enough people saying shut up. Okay, there aren't enough.
They're saying shut up to me.
To you.
They're saying shut
right?
up to you. They're not saying shut up to Mrs. Pelosi. I mean, look, we have an actual, I'm not a doctor. I actually am a doctor, but I'm not an MD doctor. Mrs. Pelosi is an actual psychopath, as far as I can tell. An actual psychopath. Mr. Schumer, and again, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a doctor of laws, is an actual psychopath. Nobody is saying shut up to him. During the presidential debates, that horrifying. Mr. Biden actually said, shut up to the president of the United States. Where are the conservatives saying shut up to the people like Nancy Pelosi and their millions of offspring in Hollywood?
He brings up a great point, and you being a John Hughes guy, Ben, I often wonder if John Hughes movies, we know the critics torched him. They just torched him. There's a lot of revisionist history with bands like Rush and John Hughes, how everybody loves them, but they were torched at their time. And I even wonder if a John Hughes movie, as beautiful and as noble as they were, could be made today. And they would, he would have to have this type of character in it, Christian. And
well,
this
I don't. Do you remember any black people in any John Hughes movies except one guy who was the valet car parker in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and maybe one or two fellow travelers in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. There were no black. Can't get me. Recast it, rewrite it, give us some black people.
And that's what, Christian, where it takes away the authenticity of everything and the beauty of it, right? You were talking about, we were talking about Norman Lear, going to John Hughes, you can't rewrite how your life was so you could put characters in. You can't make, John Hughes was a white male from Chicago, from Illinois. That's who he was. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. If you are who you are and you're authentic, Christian, you can't make a movie today. You can't make a show today.
Yeah, the authenticity of that voice, it really does matter when you're a storyteller. And John Hughes was sort of informed by his life, his experiences. And the fact that it's 35 years later and people still connect to those movies, even though they're technically dated, even though the fashions aren't the same, it means that he knew what it was like to be a teenager. He knew the angst, he knew the pain, he knew the frustrations, the joys, the hormones. I mean, he knew what that experience was like. And so it doesn't matter that there are certain dated references. It's still applicable today. And I just like to, I'm writing a book right now about woke Hollywood. And, spoiler alert, I'm starting out with a fictional screenwriter saying, what am I doing? I want to write a story, but what if I offend this group? What if this character isn't woke enough? What if the storyline isn't applicable to a certain demographic? Like, if you're an artist, you want to be free, you want to express yourself. And what we're seeing in the creative community now is just this clamping down that no, you can't express yourself. This is the story. This is not the story. This is the way. This is not the way. What a terrible way to make art.
My dear friend, I was a Hollywood screenwriter from roughly 1976 till roughly 1994 or 73. And I actually I made a fairly good living at it. And one day I was writing a piece described by the vice president in charge of development who had been a secretary before, and nothing wrong with being secretary at all. And I said, you're making this kind of without much imagination. And she said, well, that's how we want it. I said, do you see a script as being more like a poem or more like instructions on how to operate a Xerox machine? And she said, well, more like instructions to operate a Xerox machine. Well, I thought, that's it. That's the last time I ever wrote a script or even tried to sell a script. So that's how Hollywood is now, only 10 times worse. And by the way, what does the word woke even mean?
I know these people are so woke.
I don't think that word is even in the dictionary. What does woke mean?
The irony in it, Ben, Christian, of the word woke is how asleep these people are. I mean, that's the irony of the word woke. They have no joy. They bring no happiness. They bring nothing fresh. It is the exact opposite of the word of whatever the word woke is. And Gary, I want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, it's because I know I talk to Gary a lot on the phone but I hear your frustration, and it bothers me because it bothers me that somebody that served this country is so disturbed by this country and so frightened that somebody that served for over 20 years wants to leave this country. That really bothers me.
It's
where would you go, my dear friend? Where would you go?
Well, I'll just say we're working on some plan Bs is what I'll say. but not that we'll execute them. I don't want to execute them, but I'm no dummy. And I feel when you attack me as a person who's never harmed anyone, never done any, I'm not a racist. I treat people equally. Everyone knows that. I don't care what color you are. I've said this many times. I care what type of person you are. And the irony is the way they combat racism is they become racist. Okay, that makes absolutely no sense. And not only that, but Hollywood, and Christian, I want to hear your opinion on this. Hollywood is absolutely, utterly stale and brain dead. Each movie is ridiculous with the same tropes, the same song and dance. I watched Boys in the Hood. Could you imagine Boys in the Hood? And they said, you know what? You got to throw in like 8 guys from Duke because this is way out of whack. This isn't going to make it, you got to get everyone in there. I love that movie. I love it to this day.
I love Doughboy. I love that movie.
It told a great story. All I care about is the story. I don't give a crap what color you are. I don't care.
With the greatest respect to all of you gentlemen here, especially to Christian, who's a film critic, and I started out my work in Hollywood as a critic for the Wall Street Journal. You just can't even imagine what it's like here. I mean, it is a dictatorship of the highest dictatorial order. It is Mussolini's fascist Italy down to a T, except that the stormtroopers, or rather the fascisti and the black shirts, are driving Bentley convertibles. Other than that, it's the same thing. But
when did the switch happen? I want to ask you, you Ben, you Christian, and Gary, when did the switch happen? Because Hollywood wasn't always like this. You used to have patriots in this town. You used to have proud supporters.
We still have some patriots.
But you had some really, I'm talking about, you had the Duke. You had, guys like Bob. It wasn't a Democrat town. It wasn't a commie. It might have been behind the scenes. It was behind the scenes. But the movies that were made, It's a Wonderful Life, Ben. Certain movies would never be made today. Yeah. And when did it happen, and how was it just this like progressive thing? And I think about like all these things that have happened with the universities, right? At first it was a little teaching, then it became a little more teaching, and the same thing with movies. It became this type of movie where you were forced on, and then this sliding effect. But Ben, when did it happen that movies suddenly changed?
Well, it happened gradually. Sorry, all through the 30s, extreme leftists became more and more influential as writers and directors, but especially as writers. Then they were sort of stopped in their tracks by Congress and by the FBI in the late 40s and into the mid 50s. And then they came roaring back in a big, big, big way. And in the 60s and 70s, by that time, they'd become pretty much dominant. And if I may respectfully give you a self-referential twist, when I came out here on June 30th, 1976, I remember very well the day I came out, I was working as a writer and a consultant on a show for Norman Lear, and the producers, both extreme left-wingers, one who had actually been a party member, used to introduce me to the audience during the tapings as their resident fascist, because I was Republican. They're resident fascist. Now, move forward a little long down the line. I wrote a treatment for a movie about an America being taken over, by an invasion of the Soviet Union and Cuba. And it was picked up right away. It was written, the script was not great, but it was okay. Then came time for the titles to be added, and the director said he would not allow his name to be used if my name were on the screen as story by, and so because I had worked for Richard Nixon. Now, I thought for sure the Writers Guild would stomp on that and say, forget it. He's a member of the Writers Guild. Of course he gets credit. No. They said, we are not going to give any credit to any SOB who worked for Richard Nixon. That was, I would say, early 90s. So by that time, it had changed completely.
It's frightening. I mean,
it is frightening. And that's sort of, I'm very, very blessed And because I am an economist and a lawyer by training, as well as a doctor, now I have doctor's law. So I was able to earn my living in various other ways. But if you're a screenwriter and you are not towing a left-wing line, you are broke.
So, and so Christian, getting to this of how do you see any, I mean, and I'll ask you all this, do you see any avenue? Because I don't, honestly, other than maybe the Hallmark Channel or the accidental show like Cobra Kai that actually had you brought up Norman Lear. Remember, Norman Lear accidentally tripped into Carol O'Connor and Sherman Helmsley as being tremendous Hemsley as being tremendous actors, that sort of was among, sort of like, you love these people.
You've used up your quote of your nose.
Yeah, sorry about that, Mrs. Levin. And so, Christian, do you think there's any sort of avenue for different type of storytelling? I mean, because that's how we get, Ben constantly talks about writing. That's how we get our points of view across. So you write for Real Clear Politics. Gary writes for his site. Ben writes for spectator.org. But is there any sort of mainstream hope, or is that just, that I'm cockeyed?
Well, I think all the things, the cultural forces that we're discussing are intensifying now. So if there was a glimmer of light 10 years ago and a little pinpoint of light, there's almost nothing now. And I think what we're seeing, though, is I give a lot of credit to the Daily Wire. They're trying to get into the entertainment business. They're going to be producing movies and TV shows and content that is not just right of center, but just maybe apolitical, that just speaks to half the country who doesn't want the sort of the left-leaning politics. So I think what we have right now are these different sort of mini independent studios. You've got people on YouTube, you've got independent filmmakers like Fela McAleer, who are always looking to crowdfund their latest project because Hollywood won't touch them. So it's up to us as conservatives to say, hey, I'm going to write that small check. I'm going to support that different group. And it may not be the greatest piece of art ever, but it's a start and it's a toehold. And if we don't do that, we're done. If you don't support what the Daily Wire is up to, then who will? So it may be rough at times, then maybe the movies won't be as good as we hope, but we've got to kind of start exploring these alternate patterns and these different distributors, because the gatekeepers in Hollywood are not going to let us in. It's never been.
Not only are they not going to let us in, they're going to stomp on us. There's a wonderful line at the very end of the ultimate book, 1984, by George Orwell, of course, in which O'Brien says to one of the last lines, not the very last line, says to Winston Smith, "Would you like to know the future of the human race? It's a boot stomping on a human face forever." And that is how Hollywood sees its mission.
But Gary, you're going to what Christian said. Gary, you're all self-published. Every book you self-publish it, and you sell quite a few books. And what he's saying, Ben, is completely. Gary is completely right. Is that we have to start funding our own. We have to start.
Well, and that's why I did it. I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and trust me, doing self-publishing is incredibly hard because self-publishing, be honest, it doesn't have the best reputation in the world. But I also wanted to control my content because I pitched a couple books to publishing companies, and the idiots I got back and what they said to me, they were going to change everything. And all they cared about, what's your hook, Gary? You got to have a hook. I go, how about I tell a story and I tell the truth and I help people? No. We don't want to hear about that. And I just said, I've got to do this on my own. And I actually got some very good advice from an author named Gary Taubes, who I'm still friends with to this day. He said, Gary, if you can do this on your own, do it on your own. And I did. And it's brutal, but I think for what I do, I probably sell some of the most books as an indie author in what I do in the country. And that's, yeah. And trust me, it's not great. Being an author is rough, but I did it my way and I'm proud of it. And the thing is, no one can control and inhibit what I say. Everyone who comments on my books goes, that's Gary. And I go, that's all I ask. Good, bad, or ugly, indifferent, they'd go, he wrote that. And I'm glad for that. And I think what we have to do is we have to have some people step up and create these platforms where true free speech is allowed. You know, I don't care if you're on the left. I don't care if you're on the right. I just want to hear the truth. I just want to hear someone's opinion without it being biased and filtered by some third party that I don't even know about, like Jack Dorsey, that idiot. You know, maybe he should go do some more acid and stare in the corner. I don't know what's wrong with that guy, but he's an idiot. And I don't want him censoring anything that I do. And I don't think it's fair. You know, I don't know. I just do the best I can.
Fair? What are you talking about? Fair is a joke in Hollywood. Fair is a joke.
But forget about Hollywood.
Fair. What are you talking about? Where did you ever hear that word? That's a word from 150 years ago. That word doesn't exist anymore. That word's been killed in the new dictionary put out by the Ministry of Truth.
Well, now it's woke.
Nowhere word. That word
fair became Ben. Fair is woke. And
by the way,
well, you know,
I want to disagree with Gary. I don't think that he's an idiot, Jack Dorsey. I think he's a Bond villain, and I think you start there.
I say the same thing about George Soros, by the way. You couldn't make up a Bond villain worse than George Soros. But Ben, here's my question for all of you guys: we just want equal rights. I can't believe it. I understand.
All you want.
And I was talking to you before in your house, and I was saying, is there not one person in the media, right, as they're seeing the story ahead of, as they're reading the teleprompter and they're seeing what's going on in Georgia, and they're saying that this is Jim Crow or racist, not one of these people, I mean, just one, to say, I can't do this shit. I just can't do this. This is the Onion. I am reading false news, Ben.
No, they're not. There's not one person. There's not one person. Because if you do that, you lose your job. You can't pay your mortgage on your lovely house. You can't send your children to St. Albans, and you don't want to do that. So you don't want to, as I like to say, money is a constant. Truth is a variable.
But here's the thing about money, and Christian and we could all talk about this. Hollywood isn't making money. Like, it used to be.
Oh, my dear friend, you may not think so, but there are plenty of people in Hollywood who are.
No, the stars are making money, but movies have been trending downwards and losing money because Hollywood. I mean, Christian, am I wrong about?
Yes and no. I mean, clearly they're surviving. The box office numbers have been going down. But I think for them to really start to change their behavior, there has to be not just a pinch in the wallet, but a chunk, a gouging. They need to really suffer financially. That
won't do it. My dear sir, that won't do it. They are really ideologically died very thoroughly.
But I think about more the actors, where if I'm an actor and I'm constantly attacking half the country, but I'm still getting those $10 million paychecks, I don't care at all. But if those paychecks go away, all of a sudden I can't find work, and it's connected.
It doesn't matter. You're not in charge. You're a punk if you're an actor. It doesn't matter how much you get paid. You're a punk. The people who run the studios are the bosses. They get paid a lot more, or sometimes a lot less than the stars, but they're the bosses. Actors are punks.
Okay, but Ben, I want to get back to big tech for a second, because we have an election coming up fairly soon, and all of us have allowed Google to be, essentially Google, Amazon, Facebook are the government of the United States, are the government of the world. And we've sat back because we enjoy sending messages to each other. We enjoy the things these media sites offer, Ben. We've allowed them to have way too much control.
Well, what do we do about it? It's done, my dear friend. It's done. There's not. All we can do, I keep saying this day after day, and I mean it with all my poor old heart. We have to keep writing, getting it out everywhere we can, no matter how insignificant the place. Little by little, it builds up. At some point, possibly it will reach critical mass. Maybe it won't, but we will at least have given up the old college
And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. I am reading your comments. I try to be funny, thank you, on YouTube chat. And I want to thank everybody that downloads the show. Remember, download the podcast, The World According to Ben Stein, wherever you can download podcasts. And remember to give that 5-star review. Also, benstein.substack.com. And of course, on Parler at Ben Stein, you can find Christian Toto at hollywoodandtoto.com, Hollywood and Toto on Parler. And you could also find Gary Collins at Simple Life Now at Parler. And I want to welcome everybody back. This thing of mine, but it's sort of a frightening thing how we let 10%, I don't even know if it's 10%, ruin our lives, literally destroy. We have allowed 10% of the country to dictate to the rest of us how we live our lives. And we've basically sat back and said, okay.
Well, first of all, if I may say so, my life is not by any means ruined. I get very good food. I have a wonderful family. I have an adorable wifey. I have an adorable son. I have a house that I don't deserve in a million years. And I have lots of good things. So my life is ruined, but I am not allowed to tell the truth.
So that means it's ruined, Ben. If you don't have Ben, I hate to contradict you. You've lost free speech. That means your life is ruined.
Well, it doesn't mean my life is ruined. I have not lost all free speech, but I've lost a lot of free speech. Look, even at the American Spectator, which I've been writing for almost as long as it's been in operation, I have had a person there who's a very, very dear friend tell me there are certain subjects having to do with race they just can't touch. Now, that being said, they have recently changed and they're going more balls out about that subject. But even there is lack of free speech. Again, it's this race thing that has been used to be the lever to pull apart the Constitution, the false allegations of systemic racism. The amazing thing is there used to be really horrible racism and hardly anyone said anything. Now the systemic racism is gone, and that's all people talk about. Nobody wants to say anything good, then I'll just sing some songs.
No, you were saying it, Ben, you said it perfectly. I mean, you said it absolutely perfectly, and I accidentally hit the mute button, and I was reading the YouTube chat. But Christian, raised the, sorry, go ahead, Christian.
Oh, so I didn't, this is not my original thought, but people on social media have said, the left controls academia and Hollywood and the government and this and that. So if there is systemic racism, it's their fault. I mean, it's a quip, but there is some truth.
That's a very good point. That's a very, very good point. That's a very, very good point. But they would say, no. It comes out from the great unwashed Ku Klux Klansmen all over America. Anytime you go into a 7-Eleven, anytime you go into a Safeway, and again, these are wonderful stores. I have nothing against them at all. Anytime you go in, the guy behind the counter smiling at you, his hood, his whip, his gasoline, his pistol are there under the counter waiting to shoot you down if you're not a white Protestant man. That's what they would say. That's what they would say. And it's only Hollywood that has kept us from being run by this kind of fascist dictatorship of the Ku Klux Klan in power. Only Hollywood has bravely stood up to them. It's an incredibly ridiculous, nauseating lie, but that's what they say.
And so here goes the question. So as COVID hit, and Gary, I know you're not a mask wearer, especially when you're alone. And God, the people in cars that are driving by themselves that wear their masks.
I know. And sometimes two masks.
Yeah.
Sometimes two masks.
It's and we've come to this place where, last year as I was sitting there going, this isn't going to last a week or two. We've been so indoctrinated that we took it up the butt as a country, and we have allowed ourselves for over a year to be under,
martial law.
Under martial law, Christian, and it's one of the most frightening things I've ever seen in my life, and we've accepted it.
Couldn't agree more. But I think one of the things that we're not talking about, and we should be talking about, we should spend hours talking about it, is the corruption of the media on so many levels. I can't even count them all, but they've scared us to death. And they're the reason why when I walk out of my house, there are people walking their dog alone outdoors wearing masks. I'm flabbergasted by it, but I see it across the greater Denver area. I talk to people in different cities and they see it too. They scared us to death with the narrative that we're all going to die based on this particular virus. I don't diminish the virus. I understand what it is, but by golly, you're not going to go walk your dog and get it. Okay. There's no proof of it. There's no science behind it. And yet we're all doing it. And the fact that we bent to that will is, I don't recognize my country. I just don't.
But look at this. They've made us wear masks. The most recognizable part of the human being is his or her face, or in the case of gender fluidity, their face. And we have taken that away from people. We cannot see who's around us. We might as well be locked up in a prison cell, a movable prison cell of Reynolds wrap, Reynolds aluminum foil wrapped all around us. As we go through the day, we might as well be alone in a prison all day long. I don't like it. Now, bear in mind, as I say that, remember, I did just say recently, a few moments ago, I live a great life, and I do live a great life. But I hate this idea of this isolation. I sure will be glad when it's over, if it is ever over.
I want to tell you a story. So Friday, Ben, after we left the doctor, I went to AAA. I have a bad back, so I get a temporary pass for parking for my back. And there was this, wait at the AAA that was, and I said something to the guy next to me. I said, there's like 20 people working here and nobody's getting serviced. And the guy behind the counter that was working at AAA says to me, sir, if you have a complaint or this or that, or you're complaining about me, I'm like, I'm not talking to you. And secondly, just because of COVID, I'm still allowed to complain. And that even they've beaten into us, that how dare you complain in the era of COVID, Gary? How dare you? You could be dead. So don't complain about the hour and a half line you have at AAA to get a pass.
Well, obviously there's a COVID canine strain as well. And
there's what?
Strain, canine. Dogs can now transmit it to humans, apparently. But what I've seen, I made a joke with the Dunkin' Donut or Krispy Kreme was giving a free donut to people who went and gave proof that they had gotten vaccinated. And I laughed and I said, isn't this what got us in this position to begin with, was people eating too many donuts? And I said, I'll match Krispy Kreme's donation. I'm giving free punches in the face for people who wear their mask in their car. And I might even give you 2 punches in the face because I care that much. And people were dying because it is the most idiotic thing in the world. If you're one of those people driving around in your car with your mask on, you're a moron.
Please. You need help. You really do. You need help.
I see it in Beverly Hills all the time.
Yeah, you need help.
Go ahead, Gary.
No, I'm just saying, I see these people and I just go, that's the problem with America, is we have become so lackadaisical and so ignorant. We are at the cusp of the end because we are completely morons. And not only that, we're fat morons. And I saw this statistic because I'm in health. I still teach it. That's what I did after I left the government. And the biggest complaint I would get from clients is, I don't have enough time to work out like you do. I go, I work out like 5 hours a week. Come on. And now COVID hits. We have a year of people who have more time than they know what to do with. A big part of the 25, I guess, percent of the population is making more money unemployed than they were employed. And guess what they do? They turn into big, fat, obese beasts. And then they complain and say, where's my free healthcare? What are we doing?
Racist.
I'm a racist. I'm a fat shamer.
No, it didn't fool me.
No, but
that is the story.
You didn't fool me.
When you look at that, that tells the story. The main complaint people have for not getting in shape, they get, and then they turn around, they gain weight. Americans, wake up. If you're one of those people, pull your head out of your fat ass and go out the door and go walk your dog without a mask and get some sunlight. And maybe not eat those donuts. Just throwing that out there. Sorry, got on my box, but it drives me absolutely nuts.
And Ben, he raises
racism
a,
has been duly noted.
Yes.
Ben, he raises a great point. The media, and Kristen brought this up also, with the media creating this narrative. They have literally shamed us into this driving with a mask on. If you don't, you're a bad person. You know, all these forms of you're a bad human if you somehow question, if you somehow, I mean, it's the indoctrination that we've allowed to go on, Ben. I don't think you ever thought in your wildest dreams, thought you'd see in your lifetime.
No, I never thought I would, although I will say I did write a screenplay about, which got made into a 14.5-hour miniseries about a Soviet takeover of America, where there was this kind of thought control. And let's back up a little farther than that. The Japanese under the emperor before World War II and during World War II had what was called the Kempitai, the thought police, literally the thought police, who were in charge of making sure that Japanese people thought the same way and thought in the same way that sympathized with the military. And we have something like the thought police now, only it is the media.
No, it's a brilliant point, and I want to go back to what Christian was talking about before. You know,
thank you for calling it brilliant.
It is, and well, Ben, that's you. You know, come on, you know that you make me call you that at least twice a day. And but what Christian was talking about is, and what you were talking about, I find it ironic that some of the greatest shows or some of the greatest movies sometimes by luck, like Wall Street, where Gordon Gekko ended up being the hero, even though that wasn't Oliver Stone's. He wanted him to be the villain, or as in All in the Family, you know, Carol O'Connor was the hero, even though he was meant to be the buffoon. So I want to get back to the solution type thing, you know, what Christian was talking about, which is, you know, going to these sites that support conservatives, going to, you know, even spectator.org, you know, going to Gary's site, which is off the, you know, going to Gary's site, simplelifenow.com. And Kristen, you know, I know sometimes they're terrible movies and nobody wants to be in a Christian movie, or, you know, a movie with Stephen Baldwin, you know,
too much. My wife won't watch it anymore.
You know, it's a problem, Mrs. Levin. But Kristen, why don't you tell some of the sites that people could go to that they could donate to? Because I think this is a really important thing.
Well, first, I want to quickly mention that the faith-based community and the genre has actually gotten much, much better in recent years. There's been a nice ramping up of quality, and you've got some pretty big stars who are kind of entering that space. But having said that, you know, it's hard to say that there's one site, you know, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, there may be some independent places where people can go, but just kind of keep your radar open for all these different projects that are working. You know, share stuff on YouTube, on social media if you're on social media. You know, make sure that you kind of spread the stuff around that matters. Yeah, just a quick note. A couple of years ago, Clint Eastwood made a movie, Richard Jewell. It was an excellent movie, and it was almost like it was perfectly designed to appeal to people on the right. It excoriated the media, it excoriated the FBI for its overreach, and no one went to see it. And that's the kind of movie that we should have made a blockbuster and sent a message that we want more things like this. If we don't send a message that we're willing to pay for this content, it's not going to happen. There are lots of young artists out there who need our help, comedians, screenwriters, you know, YouTube channels, things like that. I'll mention Ryan Long. I'll mention Adam Yenzer. There are talented folks out there. Give them your love, give them your attention, give them your social media shares, give them your money when you can afford it. Support them. They need your help.
I can't believe, I want to say something, Kristen. You just like sent like shockwaves through me. You know, it's almost like Ben, like we're the ones now saying PBS, like, you know, we're like saying support your local artists, support. It's almost like the Gary and Ben, the parties, I mean, we've said this before, have totally shifted, where we're the ones now saying support your independent artists, support, you know, this person, support that person. And it's sort of a fascinating how that happened, that this is what we have to do now, Ben.
This is how the Reds have always worked it. They start out as outsiders and they burrow their way in. I've said this a million times. When the Soviet Revolution began in St. Petersburg, then later called Leningrad, there were only a couple of hundred people in the Communist Party. When the National Socialists started in Munich, there were only a couple of hundred people, maybe not even 100 in the National Socialist Party. They worked with energy and energy and energy. We have to work with energy and energy and energy, but not to shut people down, to open people up.
Quick point. What do we have on our side? We've got joy, we've got freedom, we've got camaraderie. We have some wonderful things that we need to kind of frame and peddle and push to the public. And I think if we make that counterculture message that we are the counterculture, but we're for freedom, I think that's a great message to share that can't be countered on the other side.
Yeah, I agree with you. Share that message of love, Gary. I know you wanted to say something.
Well, with it, it's just more of, we just, I don't understand. I think a lot of people are struggling today because everything seems to be completely turned upside down. And Christian made a very good point. I almost didn't watch the Richard Jewell movie by Clint Eastwood, or was it a series? I can't remember. It was a movie, right? I watched and not too long ago, maybe 3-4 months ago. And I almost didn't watch it because it got such bad reviews. And I went, Clint Eastwood doesn't usually make clinkers, but and I watched it. It was fantastic. As a former law enforcement officer, he hit all the heads on the nail. And Richard Jewell's story, it's a travesty it took this long to tell the true story. And the poor man died years ago. And no one even knows he's passed on. It's sad. The guy was absolutely a victim. He did nothing wrong. And that story needs to be told, because that's where we're at today, is people are being attacked for doing nothing wrong. I just always say, be careful, because eventually you're going to be the target. So,
and Gary, that was exceptionally said, and I'm exceptionally disappointed at you being a Rush fan listening to critics. And Ben, you're in one of the most iconic movies of all time that was not loved at the time. And it is one of the greatest, you're in two of the most iconic movies to me, because Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and ironically, you're in a movie called The Mask. But as you pointed out, that you don't listen to the critics. And I think, Ben, the message is love. The message is love. And as Christian's talking about, and writing as much as possible, and like you say, talking as much as possible,
and singing as much as possible.
And if you just, we are running out of time, Ben. I just want to, I'll let you. We are running out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining tonight. I want to thank
a song for you, you creep.
Ben,
never mind. I don't have any feelings. Don't worry.
You call me that, Ben. Feelings. I asked you not.
I don't have any feelings. Don't worry about me. I don't have any feelings.
Ben, creep is our safe word. I've asked you not to share that out loud. And I want to thank everybody that's tuned in on YouTube tonight. I want to thank Christian Toto from HollywoodInToto.com. You were exceptional. I want to thank Gary Collins, who's always exceptional. Go to his website, simplelifenow.com. Buy some of his products. Buy some of his books. He is an awesome dude. And of course, go to spectator.org.
Great magazine.
It is. And there's something I have to say. Talking to Ben every day is learning every day. And for the people, and I don't say that, Ben and I have some of the most amazing conversations. Where we throw stuff back at each other. And that's really important to find. And I'm done blowing smoke, Ben. But I just want to thank everybody. We're grateful. We're humbled that you listen to us. Remember to download the podcast. And Ben, if you will take us out in an amazing song on this Saturday night, we'd be honored.
Treat me like a fool. Treat me mean and cruel. But love me. Wring my faithful heart. Tear it all apart, but love me. There you are.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. We will see you Tuesday night. We were humbled. Again, thank you very much. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Good night. Power to the people. Power to the people.